Are you ready for opinion? Are you ready for a different point of view, a progressive point of view?
The Republicans are simply trying to gain power, and they'll say anything in order to do it.
Get ready for a progressive voice, the voice of Samantha Clemens, right here on The Revolution, AM 1510, The Samantha Clemens Show.
Oh, were that I, Samantha Clemens, my wife would have someone intelligent to converse with, and I would be much better dressed and probably smell better, too. But such is not the case. Good morning, Boston. Good morning, the world. I am Richard S. Kazimer, filling in for the traveling Samantha Clemens, and such a great honor to be here on AM 1510. Who am I? Who cares? Find all you need to know about my sordid past on the Facebook that is so popular with the kids at Richard S. Kazimer, that's Kazimer, or on the Twitter at RS Kazimer. Enough about me. We're also fortunate to have Dave Shook handling the producer duties today. Dave is a Heisman Trophy winner, 3-time NASCAR champion, and Olympic gold medalist in the pentathlon. Dave, welcome. Thank you so much for taking over these duties.
The hardest working man in show business, that's me.
You are, and no reason to be modest on my account. You know, with all that's going on in the world, I was trying to figure out when I got the call to come in here what it is that we were going to talk about. I think that what's going on with the Murdoch scandal is just the tip of the iceberg. Mark my words, kids. And I think the media should be jumping on this with both feet. We have not seen even remotely what's going to happen in the next few weeks involving Fox News, News Corp, and the GOP. Watch what happens there. Talking about this now is going to be old news before we even leave the studio. What I thought we'd do today is that we'll strengthen the link between the news side of AM 1510 and the sports side. If you listen to Jeff Santos' show in the morning with any regularity, sports is a big part of his show, and as well it should be. And on the weekends here, even during the week, Red Sox baseball in Spanish, which is fantastic to listen to. And sports does make the news. It is a newsworthy subject, especially when it comes to nutrition and the doping and the steroids and the controversy that goes on. Why is it that so many different kinds of team sports are indigenous to that, whereas other sports, whether it's an individual event or a team event, are virtually clean and all natural? And what we're going to do is talk about that. Are we presenting the wrong kind of image, especially to our young athletes, as parents, as coaches, as team owners, and even Madison Avenue in our advertising? Are we presenting the wrong message that you can't possibly exceed, excel, win without cutting corners and without doing something that's not natural? So my guest today is top chef turned freestyle food coach, German Lam. Chef Lam runs Glam Foods on the web at glamfoodsllc.com. German, welcome.
Great to be here, Richard.
Thank you so much. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, German and I have a history. We've known each other for years. I have been a consultant in a media capacity pro bono. I have not received 1 cent in the many years that I have been consulting successfully German's media career. You can verify that, right, German, that you have not paid me for my expert advice.
You are correct, Rich.
Okay. No pressure. I mean, there's millions of people listening all over the world, and I just wanted that verification. But, that's off subject. You're not selling a book. You don't have a product. You don't have a DVD. You don't have a fad diet, correct? You're altruistically doing this out of the goodness of your heart to save millions of people all over the world with a healthy diet. Being a little facetious here, but I don't want you to get lumped into the same category as anybody out there who's doing a flash-in-the-pan fad sort of diet. What you're doing is long-term, sustainable, good nutrition, whether it's for your life or for sports. Is that a good summation?
Absolutely. And far as a sports dad who loves sports, cooking is sports because eating is the core and cooking is part of eating. So it's the yin and yang. If you know how to cook, automatically you eat healthy because you control the process.
You do go into schools and clubs and businesses and teach about the benefits of good diet emanating from your own kitchen. But not everybody in a household is going to be doing all their own cooking. So whoever runs the kitchen, whether it's the dad or the mom, or if kids finally get involved in cooking, which I think is the ultimate empowerment of a child. If you teach your children anything, teach them how to use cutlery, fire, food, and they will rule the world. But from that aspect, are you able to teach folks how to make good, nutritional, easy-to-make meals to take with them so that they're not munching on a high-sugar, high-sucrose candy bar or something to get a limited amount of energy?
If we could teach kids how to play champions in sports, why can't we teach kids how to just cook simple meals? Yeah. And think about this morning, I came in here, I gave you and Dave this breakfast of champions: oatmeal, dried cranberries, apple, cinnamon, mango, and cranberry. And you're having this cold, and this takes 5 minutes to make.
From the scientific aspect and from the medical aspect, on the line is Stacy Kennedy. Now, Stacy is a senior clinical nutritionist, Adult Care Center, Dana-Farber Cancer Institute at Brigham and Women's Hospital at the Leonard P. Zakim Center for Integrative Therapies. She's also a nutritional fitness consultant, co-founder of Wellness Guides, the American College of Sports Medicine certified health fitness specialist. And you're again, what, German? A cook?
Chef Boyardee.
And if that's not enough, Stacy has also authored multiple articles in a variety of publications, including You Are What You Eat in the September 2008 issue of U.S. Hockey Magazine. So she knows her stuff. And Stacy, good morning. Thank you for being on Revolution Boston AM 1510. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, I'd like to start with you for no other reason than you've got some street cred here and certainly the education to back it up. You are a sports enthusiast. You are a mother. You have dealt with sports nutrition inside and out. You've worked with the elderly. You know the benefits of a good, healthy diet, correct?
Absolutely.
Now, let me ask you this. What the heck are we supposed to eat as humans? And the reason I ask is that I received an email recently from a gentleman dismissing much of what experts like yourself and Chef Lam are basically forcing on our society, in his words. Now, this person writes, human metabolism did not evolve around a diet of meat or vegetables. If it did, people consuming these foods would be disease-free. We actually evolved in a shoreline habitat with abundant supplies of seafood and tropical fruit. Eat that diet and you can stop worrying about being sick. Being healthy, people of all ages can take up sports without turning into a cripple, like what happened to Tiger Woods, end quote. He's saying that food does not evolve, or the humans don't evolve around food. I think archaeologists would dispute that. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that he presents just another viewpoint of natural, whole, unprocessed foods, right? So he's talking about foods that come from tropical regions or from the sea. You know, the other comment you were making was about, you know, other types of plant-based foods or meats. All those various foods that we've just mentioned can absolutely be part of a diet that promotes health and wellness, academic or sports performance, cognitive performance as we age. But the issue is when you talk about this idea of, you know, as humans, what we are evolved or adapted to eat, I really think the key issue that is negatively affecting our population in terms of health and wellness and diet and lifestyle are all of the processed, convenient foods, which are extremely new. We have absolutely not adapted to eating these foods, and I don't know if we can. I certainly hope that we never will. They're not good for us. They can cause more inflammation in the body, cause a lot of issues and intolerances, and that's really the issue. There are so many choices of natural, whole, unprocessed foods that we can pick from. I think the challenge is starting to get away from convenient, packaged, processed foods, so it isn't just the presence of those types of foods that aren't healthy for us. It's at the same time, people who tend to eat a lot of those sorts of newer, convenience foods, they're also missing the plant-based or healthy, natural foods that we've eaten for thousands and thousands of years. So it isn't just the presence of something bad, it's really the absence of something good that you could certainly argue is just as much of a problem. And the solution then becomes more straightforward. We start eating foods that we've eaten as a human animal for a long, long time. If it's something new and has a strange color, besides sort of blueberries, do you find like electric blue in nature? Food, you really don't. So one way to go is to think of what humans have eaten to sustain themselves. And some of these newer things in moderation, I think it is unfortunate that often, you know, as a dietitian, my profession and sort of others in the health field comes off as being very rigid or authoritative. And, you know, everything in moderation is absolutely okay. But we want the majority of our diet to be recognizable foods that come from ingredients and not packages.
What are the good grains and the bad grains? What grains are good? What grains should we be avoiding?
It gets challenging. You know, often, like, a lot of my cancer patients will say things like, oh, well, you know, my grandfather ate meat and drank milk and lived to be 97 and was just fine. Why do I have to avoid those things now? And we really can't compare how crops were grown and how foods are being sort of raised, if they're animals, to, you know, earlier, you know, 100 years ago compared to now. It's just very different. So, you know, when we talk about soy, if we're talking about genetically engineered, junky kind of soy, it's not the same as what people in Asia might be consuming on a regular basis. So, I feel like when we start lumping things into good and bad, we get a little bit too black and white and too absolute. But a variety of whole grains is something that is beneficial to human health. You get a lot more vitamins, minerals, fiber, other important things. So besides something like, say, brown rice, there are many other types of grains that are delicious and good for you, like quinoa or wheat berries. And then using things like lentils. I mean, you can make so many delicious foods based in lentils, which also have protein. They're not a grain, but it's another type of carbohydrate that is very good for you. New types of whole grains is a great and fun challenge for anyone, and they're easy and quick to make and delicious.
Well, that's a good point. The ease and convenience of it, as opposed to just grabbing something that's processed and prepackaged. Cooking is an effort no matter what you're doing. I have a serious issue with anyone who's doing a purported 30-minute meal. Now, German and I have had the good fortune of being guest chefs at a Boston Home Show a couple of years ago, and why I was there is probably the same reason why I got in radio, is because I'm good with a knife. I was way out of my element, but what I did was to make an actual real-time 30-minute meal that was nutritious and easy to make, that anyone can do it. All of this is readily available. We're not talking exotic fruits, exotic grains, exotic ingredients. Everything, especially with the supermarkets, the way they're laid out, multicultural. Everything is ready to just pick off the produce shelf, even in cans in the various international aisles. At what point did we stop doing that? Is it us as a society that's lazy? Is it Madison Avenue and their effective marketing? Especially putting the pressure on our young athletes to care less about giving 100% effort and more about receiving $100 million in a contract. Is it realistic to think anyone can achieve sustainable peak performance without the shortcuts? Stacy, I'll turn that over to you, and then I'll get German's answer.
I mean, I think when you talk about how do we get to where we are, how do we get so far away from the way that humans ate for so long and survived and did well, I mean, I think it's kind of like the perfect storm. I don't really think you can point the finger at just one entity. I mean, there's a lot of evidence about how marketing absolutely impacts not just what we choose to eat and what our kids choose to eat, but how much. And there's a really interesting study where they showed kids a TV show, and in one group of kids, they showed them commercials that were not food. It was toys and other things. And the other kids saw commercials that were food-based. And then they had them fill out a questionnaire if they liked the show or not. And they had snacks. Feel free to have some snacks while you fill out your questionnaire. And the kids who saw the show that had the commercials with food ate 40 to 50% more of the snacks than the kids who saw the commercials that were about other things. So there's absolutely a very strong marketing effect. But we always have personal choice. We always have personal responsibility, and the understanding that it can be very simple. And so we're in summer now, and we're very fortunate that this time of year you can get really delicious organic produce from so many farmers markets. There are a lot of options. Many are very affordable. You can even use your EBD card and WIC coupons and other things like that at farmers markets. So there is a lot of access to healthy food available to people. I'm not sure how often that gets publicized enough, but it is really getting back to the idea of consumer demand. So we live in such a capitalistic society, but if we start as consumers asking for more green vegetables or asking for more tomatoes or apples, we're going to start seeing more of those around on the shelf. So we do need to take some responsibility, but we need to understand that it is challenging. It's not easy. It takes planning and commitment, but it can get to be something achievable. And for our youth, it's really important that they have that exposure, that the parents set a good example, that you try to involve your kids in the cooking, but also in the discussion of what are we having, and allowing them to taste different things and come shopping and pick things out and just be part of that entire experience. And then see for themselves in terms of their sport how they feel when they have a healthy snack as compared to a processed high-sugar snack, how their performance is, and start to help them link how they're feeling with what they're eating. I think that that's something we really owe to our kids and to this next generation.
You're listening to the Samantha Clemens Show. Richard S. Kazimer filling in for the Traveling Sam on AM 1510 Revolution Boston. German, you're a hockey dad. You're an athlete yourself. Surely you must have had some temptation down the line to grab an off-the-shelf protein powder shake to achieve this fit frame that you have, rather than put some mango chutney on roasted lamb. What do you do in your own personal life? You're trained in martial arts. Your kids are hockey players. At what point did you decide, this is the right way to go? Was it when you began your culinary career? Prior to that? And how do you relate this to your kids? Why are you so different than most families out there?
Different's not the word, but I would say normal, and I think the word passion, swagger, and think about in sports, it's all about attitude. If you have attitude, for me as a business was, I wanted to teach people. And cooking, it's so easy. And once you see someone do one step, they copy you. Same thing in sports. But then the freestyle comes along is now you create your own version. But as far as martial arts, gives you discipline and structure. You need discipline and structure. In sports, you need that. Just like the Bruins. When the Stanley Cup, we went there, Game 3, and watching that game, I knew the Bruins were going to win the game. And why? Because they were disciplined, blue-collar team, and they played smart. Where the other team, they were playing uncharacteristic. So what happened is Vancouver had all this potential, but that wasn't their brand. When it comes to cooking, everyone has to develop that brand. And what I mean by that is you can't copy a recipe book because that person doesn't know what you like or don't you like. So what I do is I create this freestyle, meaning I work with each individual, a 10-year-old kid, a 17-year-old high school kid, a college student, a doctor, lawyer, go to corporate, and really break it down, not the X and O's, but actually doing it. And what freestyle is about is combination investment, know how to buy, local, seasonal. Well, cooking's all that spontaneous. It's all human elements. It's connections. So it's like your inner core. So in sports, you have to understand your inner core because you know better than anyone else what your body needs. Everyone eats differently. So for me, I figured out that it's so simple.
The food that you brought in today, the fuel food you call it, consists of what?
Quaker oats, apple, cinnamon, dried cranberries, water.
This is an energy-boosting fuel food as opposed to grabbing a power bar or having a protein smoothie, correct?
Well, you know what? Granola bar, it's made from oats. Oatmeal, I call it freestyle. It's soft. So what I do with oatmeal is I make this big batch like I'm making a soup. Next day, I have cold oatmeal. Why? I can eat it quicker. If it's hot, it's going to take me a while. So for me, I realize that your body, when it's cold, it's like a beverage drink. So if you want a lazy man drink, take your oatmeal, make it into a smoothie. So now it's like drinking water. But instead of drinking water, you're drinking something that it's going to fuel your body.
I want to get Dave, our producer's perspective on this. Now, Dave is a producer for many sports radio shows. He's also involved in the professional sports industry. You've seen it up close and personal, Dave. Now, your perspective on this, what sports do you see where this sort of natural diet is a shoo-in? It's a natural fit as opposed to some sports. What are you seeing as the difference between Tour de France cyclists who, surprisingly enough, this year there's been no doping at all?
So far.
Last year and the year before that, especially because the French hate Lance Armstrong so much. I find the fact that no human could possibly ever win as much as Lance Armstrong did and accomplish as much as he did without cheating. What kind of a message does that send to our children that, oh, I'm sorry, kid, but no, you got to cheat?
Well, yeah, to answer your original question about which sports, what the difference is between a sport like football and a sport like, well, the one that I'm most closely involved in, both on a professional and personal level, is actually basketball, because I run a program at a private high school in Cambridge. And one of the things you'll find in sports like basketball or soccer or cycling is that the fitness level and the endurance level is so much higher than it is in a sport like, let's say, baseball. But there's an intricate diet that kind of goes with being in a sport where you're constantly moving pretty much at all times. And so your fitness level has to be so much higher. As a result, your diet has to be very, very specific when it comes to being able to perform at a high level, at any level, even youth hockey. I've been covering a youth hockey tournament for the last couple of days. For these kids who are 17 and 18 years old, to be able to play 2 and 3 games in a day for 4 consecutive days is something that requires a very, very specific diet to keep you performing at your athletic peak. So with other sports, though, you don't necessarily see that. It's really important to be able to do that. Now, where you get into the trouble with enhancements like doping, like you mentioned in the Tour de France, is that because the fitness level has to be so high, and in order to perform at that, sometimes some of the athletes feel the need to cut corners in order to give themselves an edge for a sport that requires the fitness level to be at an absolutely unheard unheard of rate. And so that's where I think the doping comes into play in sports like cycling or in basketball and in other sports like that. You don't hear about it as much in basketball, but you've also heard about it in soccer at the Men's Gold Cup tournament a couple of months ago with the Mexican team having 5 players kicked off for positive tests on performance-enhancing drugs.
But not the women.
Not the women's. I'm not sure there's a real plausible reason why, other than maybe the fact that the athletes aren't being paid nearly as much, so they're not nearly as much in the spotlight, so there's not nearly the need to do that, I guess.
Back to the money issue.
Right. And I think the money comes into play there in a lot of ways when you talk about being able to stay on top or stay at that level for as long as possible to make as much money as you can. When you get into, like you were talking about, Lance Armstrong being able to perform at his age, which I think was the bigger factor in terms of why he may or may not have been cheating, to stay on top when your body starts to age like that, I don't think it's really feasible to stay at a peak world-class level athletically with people who are 5 or 10 years younger than you once you get past about the age of 38, 39, 40 years old, something in that range. And so I think that's where you start to see it come into play with somebody like Lance Armstrong or with professional players in any of the 4 major sports in this country. Once you get past the age of about 35 or 36, when your athletic peak starts to pass by.
You're listening to AM 1510 Revolution Boston. That's my theme song. AM 1510 Revolution Boston, good morning. You're listening to the Samantha Clemens Show. Like Doc Severinsen, Samantha's in, Samantha's not in. Samantha is traveling the world, and I'm sure next week when she's back, she will have some wonderful stories to tell. In the meantime, you're stuck with me, Richard S. Kazimer. Follow me on the Facebook at Richard S. Kazimer, Kazimer. I welcome everybody. And on the Twitter, at RS Kazimer. Would love to hear from you. I also want to give a shout out to my good friends down in West Australia in the Perth metro area who are listening in online. Hey guys, I love Australia, especially West Australia. There's great people down there. They're very much like New Englanders, and I think that's why I have such an affinity with them. And there's not much of a difference between a New England accent and an Australian accent. If you pinch your nose and do a thick New England accent, that's an Australian accent. And there's really not a lot of difference between g'day and aya. Shout out to those folks. We are talking about nutrition, natural nutrition, fuel foods, energy-producing nutrition for young athletes and for people of all ages. What's the difference between that and going the short route with power bars, protein shakes, powders? Why has our image been so corrupted on athletes that we impose that on our children, that in order to achieve, the only way you're going to do that is to cheat, and especially cheating your body, which ends up being a dangerous thing to do. On the line with us is a registered dietitian, Stacy Kennedy. Stacy is a senior clinical nutritionist at the Adult Cancer Care at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Brigham and Women's Hospital, also an author of many articles on sports nutrition. Stacy, thanks for hanging on.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
And I just wanted to go over your article in U.S. Hockey Magazine in September of 2008, an article called "You Are What You Eat." If you could briefly explain what that was about and what your recommendations were in that article.
Sure, absolutely. And so it'll be a good test of how eating a healthy plant-based diet can help your memory as well. But, the purpose of that article was really to share some information for parents and for young athletes as to why having proper nutrition, healthy, lean sources of protein, whole fruits and vegetables, and whole grains, how those types of foods can be beneficial in terms of their athletic performance and how they feel, meaning staying well, keeping your immune system strong, so less missed practices or missed games because you catch cold or get sick. The other component of the article was just to lay out some ideas and some really simple ways that people can incorporate these healthy foods into their regular day-to-day eating pattern, but then at the same time, how to sort of strategize when confronted with the reality of being busy, running from school to practice to games, parents working, carpooling, that inevitably, what I was hearing from parents of athletes is that so often they just need to grab something on the go. And what do you do when most of those on-the-go places don't necessarily have the best options? So what is available at a more convenience place that you could choose if you're faced with that? And the other aspect being, what can you quickly bring along with you that would sort of at least decrease the need to stop at, say, a fast food restaurant, and how that type of diet, fast food, it causes and promotes more inflammation in the body. So these kids are growing and they're very active, and all that activity is fantastic, but at the same time, that in and of itself can cause more inflammation in the body, so achy joints and muscles. So, how you can use eating to decrease some of those symptoms to, again, make your recovery between games quicker and get you back onto what you want to be doing well in school and having fun playing sports.
Fast food and convenience food, there's a big difference. I think a lot of people don't realize there's nothing about fast food that was about convenience. Fast food was solely called fast food because it went in one end and out the other. Pardon my graphic. Sure, it's you drive through and it's convenient for you, but fast food, just like a lot of food that's out there, is meant to go in one end and out the other quickly. Whether or not it sustains any nutrients and gives you a power boost is still up for debate. It's very limited, but that's what it's all about. That having been said, there are convenient ways of making natural power drinks, power foods to supply energy for an athlete or for anyone who's even just going on a walk or even at work. German, that's what you do. You go into businesses, into schools, into clubs, and you teach people how to make these very easy to make but very high nutritional foods. If you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. Since my background, from the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. So think about the Ritz, French cuisine, a lot of butter, a lot of cream. So what I did was I modified everything. So now if you want clam chowder, there's no butter, there's no cream. Actually, it's much healthier for you. So you use potatoes as a thickening. So what I have learned in cooking is that there are methods, preparation techniques. Now I break it down and I simplify it where it's like 1, 2, 3 methods, like a blender. Instead of making a smoothie, add some things that you haven't thought about. Oatmeal, some Greek yogurt, plenty of fruit, maybe add some mint to it. Well, it gives a nice refreshing to it. Now you're getting something that has a lot of flavor, but there's taste to it. And getting back to your question when you asked me about, working out when I was young, well, your body's going to grow by eating food. And I call it the food groups. Anything from Mother Nature. If it's dirty, you have to clean it, you have to prepare it, it's good for you. I found out it was simple. You are what you eat, but your body is going to dictate to you at different age what you need. When a kid, they're a Ferrari. You need to fuel them up with a lot of fuel. The way I look at it is some egg white omelets, some spinach, some tomatoes, some mushrooms, some potato bread, some juice on a daily basis.
When you go into a business, I know you work with car dealerships and other corporations. When you go in, are you trying to get them to increase their productivity and their alertness by staying away from the donut cart and the coffee and by doing more natural foods? How receptive are these businesses to either offering that in their place of business or encouraging their employees to take on that more of a natural diet to increase their productivity?
Ray Sokola, he's a client of mine, and as far as we have created a health and wellness program for their staff, and I started with oatmeal. And oatmeal is 5 minutes, and once the guy tasted, they go, oh, this looks disgusting. But now everybody was like eating that. It was like a sundae. But then they realized that it was tasty. So in food, yeah, you could have organic food, you could have local food, but the key thing is, does it taste good? If it doesn't taste good, humans are not going to eat it. So you have to make it taste good, and you have to add other ingredients to it. Example, wildflower honey. It's raw, it comes from bees. I think about ingredients that are natural. Salt, sea salt, kosher salt. Why? It has more flavor. So that's what I have learned working at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, is that the finest thing, but then I realized that everyone has basic ingredients. So it's like taking onions, tomatoes, carrot, celery with chicken and turning it into a gourmet meal, but it's simple.
After you've gone in, have you gone back to check weeks or months later to see where people are on this and if there was any sort of statistical data proving that their productivity level has risen and that people are still on this or they were receptive to it?
It's a long journey, and the question I asked you is, how long did it take to clean Boston Harbor? So far as with a human body, when you're at a stage where it's not at your normal weight, it's going to take a long recovery. Recovery meaning is that your eating habits have to be clean.
But then that gets back to the sports aspect of what we're talking about, where a child, especially in youth hockey or Little League or even on the college level that are looking for, waiting for the scouts to come along to go into the pros, they don't have a lifetime. They've got a few seasons to get to peak performance, even if it's just one game when the scout is sitting up in the bleachers. Is that one of the key reasons why we're always looking for the shortcut? I mean, because you can't turn back the clock. So how effective is going natural to achieve getting a contract with a major league team? Is that realistic? Go ahead, Stacy.
There are short-term and long-term benefits of these healthy eating choices. So as, German's saying that, when you're an adult, you've had 20, 30, 40 years of bad eating habits, that person is going to take a bit longer to get to a place where they're really feeling amazing. But that's not to say that within a week or so they're not going to be feeling much better. For someone who's younger, you have a much better opportunity at actually preventing getting yourself in that spot in the first place. So, for a young athlete who decides, a high school student decides, well, they're in the cafeteria that day and they're going to go for the salad bar instead of cheeseburger and french fries, you can start to feel better in a pretty short amount of time and start to see benefits rather quickly in terms of some of the short-term things like, for example, energy level and, having more energy like in the moment when you're practicing. So, the idea of, now you're going to eat this plant-based diet, you may have a lower risk of getting heart disease or cancer later in life isn't something that is always appealing to a young athlete. They're not as interested in that long-term benefit. But short-term, there's a lot of benefits to be gained as well in the moment. So, it takes a lifetime of practice, but it's not to say you're not going to get something good rather immediately.
You're listening to AM 1510, Revolution Boston. Our call-in line is 617-237-1234. Dave Shook, our producer, is also the only man to ever climb Eiger, K2, and Mount Everest in street shoes. Now, Dave, you've been in the field. You're a sports producer, and you're also very active in youth sports. What are you seeing out there from a coach level? Is anyone even bothering to instill in their young athletes proper dietary nutrition and kind of circumventing or staying away from the sugary drinks and the power drinks and the energy drinks, which we'll also get into now?
It really depends on what level you're talking about. If you're talking about the type of school or the type of environment that I work in, which is a private school, and you spend years getting to know these kids and building relationships with them and being able to instill those kind of values in them, yes, I think you see at least some form of it anyway, some form of the commitment to proper nutrition and proper conditioning and things like that because they've had time to build those relationships. But if you look out at and this is again not an insult to travel leagues like in basketball with the AAU circuit and with local town leagues, things like that, they don't spend nearly as much time with these kids on a week-to-week basis, maybe 2 days a week tops a lot of the time. So they don't have the opportunity to really instill those values. And so it's got to come from the parents in that respect. And you mentioned what it's like to try and get a professional contract or a chance to play at a high level in college. So much of that comes from the way you're taught in terms of your conditioning and your nutrition. The people who get those offers are the ones who have been doing the correct things with their body and with nutrition for years and years. It's not something that you can decide in your senior year of high school 2 weeks before the season starts, I'm going to start eating right and then I'm going to get a Division I scholarship offer. It's the ones who have been working at it since they were little kids, who were backed up by their parents and then through their school taught the correct way to prepare themselves for the competition regardless of what sport it is. That's really what you see at the youth levels, is the ones who have been in a sustainable program for years and years, 5, 6 years. If you're at a private school, sometimes it can be as many as 8 years with one sport where there's a program in place. Whereas the folks who just play sports at a town level or on an AAU type circuit where they don't have the same interaction with the coaching staff and the trainers as you do at a private type education, you don't see it as much unless it's coming from the parents because they don't have the time to build those relationships.
German, again, going back to the fuel foods that you make, and I also want Stacy to weigh in on this as well, is that you're using oatmeal and a lot of fruits, which are diuretics. So is it realistic to eat something like this an hour or two before a game that may last a couple of hours, and then the digestive process starts kicking in, as opposed to eating something that doesn't need to break down in the system? And how far in advance, or are you even eating this during the game to get an energy boost?
Absolutely, yes. For my own kids right here, this is something that ever since they play sports, I realized that they need fuel. So if you give them something that it's small, that's already broken, it's much easier for their digestive system. So I kind of understand that the human body, if you have something that's large, it's going to take a long time. But if you make a smoothie, now everything is broken down. So the way I look at it, it just goes right in your system. As a marathon runner, when I ran, you would take the glue, you would take the power bars, the chocolate, everything, and I realized, gee, you know what? What happened if I just take a bottle of raw honey and do that? I'm thinking, gee, instead of buying me a package that's been sitting, on inventory, I could go go to, a supermarket and buy organic honey. I realized that it was so simple, but now it's about education.
And you were tossing down raw honey when you were running, man?
No, I wish I did. Are you kidding me? I was doing what most runners were doing, taking that little package and sucking it. And I'm thinking, but then I realized I could take the food. The food has that natural fuel for you, and I keep saying that is think about protein. Fish, sushi, it's great. Turkey, grains, vegetables, and when you talk about as a chef, seasonal vegetables. You cook with what's available from Mother Nature, and that's the best way to cook because it's cost effective, it's simple, and right now, seafood, New England, the best seafood in town.
Absolutely. Stacy, how receptive has the youth sport and the professional sports industry been to your suggestions on going a more natural diet for sustainable energy?
I think it's interesting that I want to just kind of briefly weigh on your earlier question about the timing of what types of foods to eat when in relation to when you're actually going to be doing your athletic performance. But yeah, I think it varies. I think what Dave is saying too is that it sort of depends on the receptivity and the understanding of the people who are in charge, the adults. So it varies. There were some comments that came in after the article, or actually some that were included as well in the article in the USA Hockey magazine that, some parents just don't feel that it matters or it's important. They haven't really had a foundation for nutrition education in their own life or really an understanding of how it could be beneficial, maybe haven't tried some of these things. But then there are so many others who are really starting to understand that you do have a lot more control over how you feel, how you look, and how you perform. So I would say, as we move forward in time, that there's certainly more receptivity, but it depends on where you are. Boston, is a place where it's a huge medical community. It's a huge community of, more sort of educated folks. So I think we're a little skewed. We go to middle America, we may have a different amount of receptivity there. But I think the interesting part is the kids, because, I see this, with my own kids, particularly my older son who's in elementary school now, but even in working with schools, that when children are given healthy foods, fruits and vegetables, they'll eat them. They like them. They feel good. I think we have this sort of misinformation that, kids are going to turn their nose up or it's not cool or it's not something they want. I don't think that's necessarily the case.
It goes back to us being responsible parents, and I think that's pretty much the bottom line on it. We are what we eat, but those around us are also what we feed them, so that makes perfect sense. Stacy, one more question for you, and if you could touch on this briefly. How safe are energy drinks? For kids in particular, they are very dangerous. They're not safe at all. They're not good for adults either. They're really a health hazard and a risk for our youth. What is in it? What's the major component in those drinks? There's one that's very popular now, and they're touting that it's all natural and a lot of herbs and whatnot. But even from a natural end, those things can be a little dangerous?
Right. Isn't arsenic natural? There's all kinds of toxic things that are natural, but that doesn't mean that we should be ingesting them. It's a lot of caffeine, it's a lot of sugar, and it's a lot of herbs. That these things have interactions if a kid is on, any kind of medication. You don't know if somebody has an underlying heart condition, they're dehydrating. There's just absolutely nothing good about them. You can get an energy drink from making a healthy smoothie. You can throw a couple leaves of Swiss chard, some fruit, some coconut water, something like that. There's many combinations, but these this whole energy drink fad is something that has nothing good to offer our kids.
Okay. Our guest today has been Stacy Kennedy, registered dietitian with Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Brigham and Women's Hospital here in Boston, and also Chef German Lam. You can find Chef Lam on his website at glamfoodsllc.com. We have been talking about good nutrition as opposed to the bad stuff and the pressures we put on our young athletes and even older folks as well, myself included. My diet consists pretty much of processed meats and refined sugar. Are you going to finish that donut, by the way, German?
That was my 20th donut right there.
And also Dave Shook, who is a 5-time NASCAR champion, a Formula V racer. You've done it all, and it's been great.
Thanks so much for having me.
Samantha Clemens will return next week. My name is Richard S. Kazimer. By all means, find me on the Facebook thing at Richard S. Kazimer. You can't miss me. I'm the guy with the big jug head with the headphones on. That's Kazimer on Twitter at RS Kazimer. In German, your Twitter is what?
It's Glam Foods.
All right. Thank you, everybody. You're listening to AM 1510 Revolution Boston.